Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a look at a venue that totally defied the odds, a place that became the beating heart of a truly staggering musical and cultural movement. I'm talking about the legendary Wigan Casino. Okay, let's dive into this. So, let me just ask you something right off the bat. If I asked you to name the absolute best disco in the world during the late 1970s, where does your mind immediately go? I mean, you might picture a velvet rope in Manhattan, right? Somewhere pulsing with flashing lights, wall-to-wall celebrities, and just overflowing champagne. Because on one side, yeah, we have Studio 54 in New York. Super glitzy, celebrity-filled, very mainstream. But on the other side, we have the Wigan Casino in Lancashire, England. It was gritty, strictly working class, and honestly, housed in an old decaying ballroom. But here's the really incredible part. In 1978, the American music magazine Billboard officially voted the Wigan Casino as the best disco in the world. It actually beat out Studio 54. I know, it sounds totally impossible, doesn't it? Well, let's figure out how an aging ballroom in the industrial north of England managed to take the crown. Section 1. The unlikely global mecca. A staggering cultural phenomenon. 100,000, guys. That is the number of registered members the Wigan Casino had at its absolute peak. To put that into perspective, they had so many members that back in 1975, the management actually had to temporarily suspend membership just to deal with the insane overcrowding. Every single week, an estimated 12,000 devoted attendees would pass through those doors. They were traveling by cars, coaches, trains from all across the country. Over its 8-year lifespan, an estimated 4 million people visited. 4 million! But, what exactly were they all flocking there to hear? Section 2. Unearthing Rare American Soul, the musical foundation of a movement. Because I can tell you right now, for sure, these massive crowds were absolutely not dancing to the top 40 radio hits. You see, the Wigan Casino was the spiritual home of Northern soul, and this was a fiercely underground music movement. It was based entirely on rare, fast-tempo, highly melodic, but just incredibly obscure 1960s American Motown and R&B tracks. While the mainstream music industry in the 70s was pivoting hard toward modern funk and disco, these dancers, they wanted the forgotten, upbeat sounds of the 60s. They championed the artists who had completely flopped on their initial launch, or, obscure B-sides that had been totally ignored by commercial radio. So to keep this incredibly hungry crowd satisfied, DJs couldn't exactly just walk into the local record shop down the street. They literally had to become musical archaeologists. DJs like local legend Russ Winstanley and Richard Serling, they would scour these tiny backstreet record stores and literal junk shops in the United States, just digging deep to unearth completely unheard tracks. Winstanley even had his uncle in Florida mailing over boxes of obscure records just to keep that Wigan dance floor moving. They were hunting for absolute rarities to bring all the way back to the north of England. Section 3. Inside the all-nighter. Sensory overload on a sprung wooden floor. Okay, just imagine arriving at this place at midnight. Stepping onto that floor meant you were adhering to an incredibly specific uniform and vibe. First off, you'd arrive wearing a leather trench coat, which was basically instantly discarded at the door. Underneath all that, the boys and girls wore wide-collared shirts, tank tops, and massively flared trousers. The girls often wore these long cotton dresses that would just fan out beautifully during spins. And the dancing, wow, it was frenetic, it was acrobatic. Dancers would drop right to their hands, executing high kicks, insane spins, and actual backflips in this dizzying display across the venue's massive sprung wooden floor. And honestly, perhaps the most shocking part to anyone looking in from the outside, 0 alcohol was served. There was no chatting up at the bar, no romance. You came there to dance. Now, surviving a literal 8-hour dance marathon on a massive floor obviously requires some immense energy. And while amphetamines were a complex component of the scene for some folks, helping to sustain dancers through those grueling all-nighters and keeping the conversation flowing, it is really important to note from our sources that this was absolutely not promoted by the scene's organizers. In fact, random police searches frequently turned up nothing at all. Ultimately, the true driving force that kept thousands of kids moving until dawn, it was a pure, almost religious devotion to the music itself and just the raw adrenaline of being in that crowd. Section 4. A working-class sanctuary. Finding belonging amidst deindustrialization. And this brilliantly illustrates the stark parallel between the industrial north of England, with its coal and cotton towns facing severe economic decline, and Detroit, USA, the Motor City, and of course, the birthplace of Motown. There was this subconscious kinship, a real working-class solidarity between the industrial youth of the North and the Black recording artists in America. The Northern youth just deeply connected with the soulful, emotional, and hard-driving music being made by artists an entire ocean away. The whole scene became exactly what's described right here, a social and cultural identity that acknowledged a sense of history, collectivism, and a shared sense of a recent past. Wigan Casino wasn't just a nightclub, it was a sanctuary. For working-class youth trying to navigate the pretty grim realities of 1970s Britain, it offered this profound sense of belonging, authenticity, and togetherness that they just couldn't find anywhere else in their lives. And this sanctuary had a massive ripple effect on broader music history. It didn't just allow the crowd to worship American artists, literally reviving the careers of icons like Edwin Starr and Martha Reeves, who were totally amazed to come over and find thousands of British kids adoring their forgotten records. It also fundamentally shaped future UK legends. You had regulars there like Paul O'Grady and a young Sean Ryder of the Happy Mondays literally taking notes. And get this, a young Mark Almond would pester the DJ every single week to play a specific song called Tainted Love. He was so obsessed with it that he later recorded it with his band Soft Cell, turning it into one of the biggest selling singles of all time. The DNA of Wigan Casino is literally woven right into modern pop music. Section 5. The last record played. The emotional devastation of the final night. So in 1981, the local council actually refused to extend the lease on the building because they wanted the land to build a new civic center. Now, on Sunday mornings at the casino, the long-standing tradition was that Russ Winstanley would end every single all-nighter with 3 specific records. These were famously known as the 3 before 8. You had Time Will Pass You By Toby Legend, Long After Tonight Is All Over by Jimmy Radcliffe, and finally, I'm On My Way by Dean Parrish. For 8 whole years, hearing these songs signaled to everyone that it was finally time to go home. But the morning of December 6, 1981, was completely different. It was the final night. 8 a.m. came and went. The 3 before 8 were played, but the crowd simply refused to leave. By 9 a.m., you had a packed house of dancers just sitting on the sprung floor, holding each other, weeping uncontrollably. Russ Winstanley actually played the 3 closing tracks 3 times over, crying right along with the crowd. But the dancers just kept begging for more music. They literally couldn't let the magic end. Winstanley knew he had to do something to break this spell of hysteria. So he reached into his record box, pulled out a record completely at random, and announced over the mic that it would be the absolute final song. He pulled out Do I Love You, Indeed I Do by Frank Wilson. And guys, this was a legendary record. Only 500 copies were ever pressed back in 1965, and the artist had 499 of them destroyed. Winstanley was playing the only surviving library copy in existence, a song made famous entirely by the Wigan Casino. After 2 minutes and 31 seconds, it was over. He packed his records and drove away. The physical erasure of the casino after that was devastatingly rapid. The club closed its doors in December 1981. A mysterious fire completely gutted the empty building just a few months later in May of 1982. And by 1983, the council had completely demolished it. And you want to know the bitter irony in all of this? The civic center they tore it down for was never even built. Today, if you stand on the exact site where 12,000 kids a week used to pour their hearts out on the dance floor, you'll be standing in the Grand Arcade Shopping Center. Reflecting on the loss of the venue, DJ Russ Winstanley probably said it best. He said, "It was like there was magic built into the walls. And once that has gone, you never get that back, do you?" I think it just perfectly captures the profound, almost unspeakable sense of loss felt by a community that had found a true home on that sprung wooden floor. Which leaves us right here. Have you ever loved something so deeply that you dance until 8 a.m. just to feel like you were part of a community? Wigan Casino wasn't just a room with loud music. It was a fleeting, beautiful moment in youth culture where working-class kids managed to create an entire universe of their own. It reminds us of the power of music, the very human need to belong, and the poignant, inevitable impermanence of the things we love the most. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep the faith, and I'll see you next time.